Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's What's Up Wednesday, where we go live with you on Facebook and LinkedIn every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time to talk about our upcoming 21st Annual International Human Trafficking and Social Justice Conference, which is going to be hosted virtually this year on September 18th through the 20th. So, my name is Anna Schramm. I am the conference coordinator at the University of Toledo's Human Trafficking and Social Justice Institute. Thank you all for joining us today. And we have a special guest with us this week. Dr. Heather Sloan Cleary is an associate professor in the social work program at the University of Toledo. So we do get to be together at UT. She is also the co-creator of the Fearless Writers program and has been coordinating the art exhibits at our conference for about the past 10 years. So hi, Heather. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hi, thanks for inviting me, Anna.
Yeah, so today we are going to be focusing on our art-related presentations at this year's conference. For anybody new who's listening, you will know that I've been talking about our various sessions you can attend at our conference. We are very diverse and have a lot of topics that you can choose from. So this week we're going to be focusing on our art sessions and how art is related and intertwined in the anti-trafficking and social justice fields. But before we get a little too more into that, Heather, can you just start us off by telling a little bit more about yourself and the work that you do?
Sure. I teach social work at the University of Toledo. I teach policy and macro theory and practice classes. I am a part of multiple sort of healthcare interprofessional groups at the University of Toledo. So I'm part of the steering committee for interprofessional education. I'm also on the Health Equity Research Center board. And then most recently, I've been part of a Literacy Everywhere project, which is looking at the intersection of early literacy and housing instability. So research-wise, I look a lot at poverty in general and the influence of implicit bias on health disparities, mental health disparities, and how creating empathy is sort of counters some of that. And so that's where I hang out. And Fearless Writers helps me with some of that. So you've already sort of mentioned Fearless Writers, but that's my sort of community engaged project that I do to bring students from the university, interprofessional students, to work with high school students, sort of to counter redlining policy, which if you aren't familiar with that, it's where in the 30s and 40s, there was sort of discrimination policies that kept certain groups in certain neighborhoods, and those neighborhoods have been poorly resourced. So there's been decades and decades of poor outcomes in those neighborhoods, but also it's kept us all socially separated so that we don't know each other very well. And that helps to keep stereotypes and sort of myths about neighborhoods and different marginalized groups. So Fearless Writers is there to try to create some of that myth busting, and also for kids that are in neighborhoods that might not get exposure to people that have gone to college or professionals, they get to hang out with college students and go, you know what, I could go to college. This guy's no better than me. I can do this, right? So it any good mentoring program sort of serves both, right? Everybody's learning from each other, and that's sort of what I'm up to.
That's awesome. That's really great work that you're doing. I know your full-time job is as a social work professor and doing social work. But you are also very enmeshed in the art world. I don't think an average person kind of thinks about how those two are related or connected. So for those of us who aren't as involved in the art space, can you explain the importance and the use of art in both the anti-trafficking movement and in social justice field?
Sure. So, I mean, right off the top of my head, I think of art as a very powerful way to move folks, to inspire them to want to make a change, right? It's also a very accessible way to express really powerful emotions about social injustice. So really all successful social movements in the United States have had some art component. If it's just you thinking about protests and protest posters, I've been to some protests and the protest posters are so creative and amazing. They should all be t-shirts. They're just so great. But there's that, but then there are also artists. I mean, artists serve a purpose in our culture of really sort of cryptically, abstractly calling attention to injustice, right? So
Mm.
it's a whole group of intellectuals who often are willing to take the big risks. So this is true across the world. So, in my opinion, it's a group of social justice folks that we really need to pay attention to. Um, and a lot of shifting and a lot of push on power has happened through the art sort of scene, both the
Mhm.
popular art scene and also sort of academic art scene. So, um, yeah, and I think for survivors of injustice, art is a way to really start to feel emotions that might be too overwhelming to use words to speak about. So, like practically, social workers often use art as a way to engage clients that might really be afraid to tell their story
Mm.
or are really trying to figure out their emotions. They're so overwhelmed by them that, sometimes a painting or a poem helps them access in a way that feels safer, sort of those big giant emotions.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for explaining that. And I feel like I have learned a lot from you over the past however many years, just on how it is used in the social justice fields for, you know, whether it's social justice movements as a whole or like for individual growth and processing. So, yeah. And then so as I've mentioned, you have coordinated the art exhibits at the conference. Over the last decade when we were in person, but now since we are virtual, you've also been a presenter at our conference several times. So tell us a little bit about your experience with our conference and why you keep coming back year after year.
Sure. Well, there's lots of reasons. I mean, I actually think that this conference is very unique to any other conference I've ever been to. So, as a social work clinician, I would go to professional conferences all the time, and there's certain expectations, certain audiences. And then, as an academic, later in my life, going to academic conferences is a very different culture. But the fact that this conference invites survivors and people with lived experience, expertise, and all of these groups that don't usually get together all together, which can cause controversy and all kinds
Mm.
of crisis. But I think that's really important to have. As a presenter, it's always tricky because I never can fully please all the audience members. So it's very challenging because everybody has sort of a different objective. But I like that. It keeps me on my toes and has me
Mm.
thinking about um, conferences and how they are a space of knowledge creation and power, right? So this
Mhm.
really has you thinking like, why don't we have everyday folks in these conferences? We should,
Mhm.
because it shouldn't be something that's just kept private for clinicians or academics. It should be a collaboration between the community and the professionals that are part of the community. So, and then Celia is a colleague of mine, a friend of mine, and I pretty much, go to bat for anything she's up to. And so she's also created a space for us to bring art and especially arts informed research into a space that it's not always welcomed in these spaces.
Mm.
So you guys, I feel like you, Anna, and also Sandy Sieben have all been very nurturing and letting us sort of build some of this and really talk about this kind of research. So, photo voice and some of the arts informed research that's going on is also being seen by folks that might not go to more arts based qualitative conferences.
Mhm.
So it's got those hard science quantitative and these like arts based qualitative coming together in the same space and having to really be open minded to
Mhm.
there are lots of different ways to do research. There's lots of different ways to um, look at a particular topic. And so yeah, I've been very dedicated because it really falls in line with my vision for my work as a scholar and as a social worker. So it's really easy for me to want to come back every year. Yeah.
I
Yay.
love to hear that.
Yes.
And also, I'm glad that you do come back year after year too and are always bringing new art, new presentations, new arts informed research, and really, pushing us to kind of think in that way. And, with that, I think it adds another layer of diversity to the conference. Like you were talking about, how you have all of these academics, researchers, clinicians, survivors, and artists, so we're all there together learning from each other. So you're actually presenting again at this year's conference. Your session is titled Community Empathy Write Year 2, What Can Be Learned by Writing into Friendship and Social Mobility. So I know you're going to be covering a lot of great information in that session,
Yeah.
but give the listeners just a little brief overview of what you're going to be talking about.
Yeah. So sort of out of the COVID-19 shutdown and some of the challenges of doing community engaged interventions at all, with high school students and college students, super busy, also very stressed out, lots of anxiety that was created by COVID-19 and that we're still, it's not gone away, and
Yeah.
grief, lots of grief. We developed a time limited project. So we do prompts from November to March on particular topics, and we pick writers to activate a conversation about those sort of public health, public policy topics. So year one, we looked at Emily Dickinson and COVID-19 experience of women's experiences of COVID-19. Now, Emily Dickinson was she shut herself in, and so she could see beauty in a very limited space, and some people saw her as sort of the patron saint of COVID-19. So we used her writing about a lot of things. Grief is definitely embedded in her writing, to look at our area, our small community's experience of women and COVID-19. And so this project meshes community writing projects, which there are lots of community writing projects in the United States. The one that I sort of look to is the New York Writers Coalition, which also uses Amherst Writers and Artists writing method, which I'm trained in, to create moments of equity between different people. We write for about 5 to 10 minutes, and then we give strengths-based feedback about what's powerful, all of that. Most of us our writing has been butchered by teachers, by various people. So it's also, when that happens in school, it sometimes has people be quiet, but that voice and confidence in your voice is important to advocacy for yourself and for others. So the project sort of builds confidence in college students as well as high school students in a space where we've been very tender, often overly critiqued about our, you're not writing like I would as a teacher, or you wouldn't write. So it's a space of some real interesting discrimination. So we're really at the heart of that to try to undo some of that damage. Yeah. And then also the other group that we sort of look to is narrative medicine, which is a movement in medicine that has the physician writing with patients so that the physician can empathize more with the patient. But we're taking it more from a macro level of like a community empathizing with particular groups of people. And so we're really at the intersection of those two things, which I think we're unique in doing that. And then this year, we looked at Shetty's research on friendship and social mobility. So this idea that your friends can potentially be helpful to maintaining certain economic and social advantages, and then disadvantage, like the lack of friendships, like diverse friendships can come in the way of some of that. So we looked at that research while also being activated by the friendship between Langston Hughes and Zora Neale Hurston, who were Harlem Renaissance writers. So my PhD's in cultural studies, so I look at cultural history. So I like to look at past writers to sort of see it, like what they were writing about, what similar things are going on now. And obviously discussions of racism are huge at that time and also continue today. So it sort of has us thinking about how we've grown and maybe how we've stayed sort of maybe not grown in places that they sort of hoped, I think, that we would. So and then we analyze, a small group of that group analyzes all the writing, we collect all of it, and then we look at themes that come up so that we can look in the literature to see sort of what. So it's an inductive, qualitative, arts-informed sort of process. And
That's awesome.
yeah.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. And I know you could continue to talk about it, but I want to make sure that people come to your session so they can learn more. So yeah, I know you're going to talk about a lot more of that and have, some of the writers actually talk in that as well. So if you do want to hear more from Heather in her session, you go to our website, which is traffickingconference.com/register. Make sure you are registered for the conference. I do want to highlight a couple of our other art related sessions that are going to be at the conference. Remember, you do have over 100 breakout sessions to choose from. So I'm just going to be naming a couple right now. So make sure you go on our website to look at all of those. But that's a lot of sessions. It can be overwhelming, but remember that if you are registered for the conference, all of the sessions are going to be recorded and you do have access to view those on demand for 3 weeks after the conference. So you can go back and watch sessions that maybe you didn't get a chance to view live. So some of the ones that I do want to highlight are Lisa Klonk-Schoner will be presenting on Reclamation, a narrative approach to combating human trafficking. Then Marcy Renee and Kim Peters will be talking about The Strawberry Girls, story and art to change lives in the sex trafficking industry. Dr. Heather Evans will be discussing the use of photo voice in her session. We had mentioned photo voice earlier. So Dr. Evans, her session is from the voices of sex trafficking survivors, the power of bearing witness to complex trauma and post-traumatic growth. And then Elizabeth Gade will be talking about writing to heal as human trafficking survivors. So these are going to be amazing sessions. There's other sessions that are related to art as well as the other art exhibits that I mentioned that we have. So make sure you check out our full schedule, which is traffickingconference.com/schedule. You can go on there, read more about the sessions that we have. So you can choose which ones you want to go to and see which topics interest you most. So Heather, is there anything else that you want to add before we wrap up for today?
Well, I just probably want to highlight the art exhibits. So there are art exhibits. There's art that was created by clients who are receiving mental health treatment. Also, Fearless Writers has some offerings there. There are some performances as well. The Sons of Toledo, which is a short film about gun violence and the youth response to that film. There'll be screenings every night of the conference at 7 is what we're shooting for, I think. And so please engage in the art exhibits. We would love to have you see what at least our area is doing, and I'm sure that most people's communities are also doing similar things. You might just not see it, and after this you will. So yeah, I appreciate being
and I really encourage people to check out those exhibits and go to the screenings. One thing I love about our conference is that we have other ways for people to engage with the content or different ways that people learn, whether that's visual or, going to a typical conference. So it's not just something where you have to sit in front of a screen for 3 days, listen to people talk at you. There's other ways that you can interact. And I think, the art exhibits, we have vendor booths, and then we have these screenings that happen after the conference. And you have been a big part of bringing those additional aspects to the conference to make our attendees have a better overall experience and, to get them more involved. And like you said, know what's maybe happening in their community that they didn't know about before, or maybe gives them ideas to bring back to their community. So I thank you for the work that, you've done in our community and what you've brought to our conference. I really encourage people to check those out. And thank you, Heather, for joining us today on our What's Up Wednesday. So a reminder to all, we do go live on Facebook and LinkedIn every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern time to talk about the upcoming conference. We'll be doing this throughout throughout the summer. We're going to continue to highlight the various topics you can learn about in different presentations. Next week, I'm going to have another special guest on with me, Dr. Ezgi Yaman Kennedy, and she's going to be talking about our international type of presentation. So if you want to learn more about our conference, all of the great things that we've talked about today, you can find that on our website, traffickingconference.com. We look forward to seeing you at the conference in a couple of months. We look forward to seeing you back here next week to join us for another What's Up Wednesday. And we hope that everyone has a great rest of your day. Bye, everyone.